Good evening. I'm Joan Lang, co-chair of the Benefit Committee, and also I have the honor of being the co-chair of the Erase Racism Board of Directors. Thank you. On behalf of my other co-chair, Ed Picciotto, and the board, we extend an enthusiastic welcome and deep appreciation for your attendance, whether virtually or in person, at our 20th anniversary at the Garden City Hotel. Last year, on November 17th, we had our first virtual benefit because of COVID-19. We have all been challenged by the pandemic. Today, although we mourn the devastating loss of life, we are grateful that we have an opportunity to pause, to celebrate the many achievements of Erase Racism, and to recognize the Abraham Krasnoff Courage and Commitment Award honoree George Duffy. And our Erase Racism Leadership Awardee, New York State Nurses Association. Please take home one of our journals, printed gratis by D&B engineers. Appreciation to D&B. In addition to the sponsorships, the donation list, the journal ads, you will also find a brief listing of Erase Racism's accomplishments, special letters, bios, and more. As is our custom, our program will be brief. You will find a small program card at each table. At this time, I would like the board members to stand to be recognized. When I call your name, please stand and remain standing until the entire board can be acknowledged. Co-chair Ed Picciotto, Secretary Marge Rogatz, Assistant Secretary Dr. Lorna Lewis, Treasurer Marty Schwartz, Assistant Treasurer Craig Wolfson, Director Kalpana Badaka, Fred Brewington, the Honorable Judge Gerald Carter, Howard Glickstein, Jim Smith, and Christina Vargas. Thank you for your service. As Ed and I said in our board letter in the journal, borrowing the words of Charles Dickens 162 years later, it is the worst of times and another intolerable season of darkness. Yet your presence here tonight, your energetic commitments will move us from the season of darkness and a winter of despair to the spring of hope. Thank you. It is now my pleasure to introduce Kalpana Badaka. Although a new board member, she volunteered immediately as the co-chair of the Benefit Committee. Thank you, Kalpana, for your out-of-the-box thinking, for your energy, and for your 200% commitment to all that we do.
Thank you so much, Joan, and thanks to each of you for taking the time to be here tonight. It is such a privilege to serve on the board of Erase Racism, a civil rights organization that has had such a meaningful impact on residents of Long Island and statewide over the past 20 years. To me, this special organization sits at the cross-section of advocacy, leadership, and public education with respect to racial equity. Erase Racism staff and partners work tirelessly every day to push the public and private sector and all of us to make good on the promise of equal opportunity for all. You being here tonight and spreading the word amongst your network helps power our work throughout the year. So please tell your friends about Erase Racism and the incredible work that is being done. And I want to say that the staff and the board value every single donation that comes in through the benefit and throughout the year. You will see that the names of our sponsors have been scrolling on the screens, Throughout the night, we paused it, but they'll resume after this program. Please review the screens to see our supporter sponsors, our friend sponsors, and our contributors for whom we are so grateful. Right now, we just wanted to highlight a few sponsors. First, our visionary sponsor, Saltzman Family Foundation. Please help me acknowledge their incredible contribution. We also recognize our two leadership sponsors, Leadership Conference of Women Religious Long Island and Roger Tillis.
I have the honor of recognizing our Trailblazer sponsors. Please hold your applause until after I have read all the names. 1199 SEIU, United Healthcare Workers East, Kalpana Badaka and Vinod Bhatt, Concern for Independent Living, Howard Glickstein, Nancy Garoff, Hofstra University, Eric and Sandra Krasnoff, Joan K. Lang, Nabali Shklonik, PLLC, New York State Nurses Association, Northwell Health, Jane and Marty Schwartz, Scope Education Services. Please join me in thanking them.
And finally, I'm pleased to recognize our sustainer sponsors. Once again, please hold your applause until I've read all the names. Elaine and Jess Gross, Paula and Bill Jennings, Malloy College, Arda Nazarian, New York Community Bank Foundation, NowPow, Marge and Peter Rogatz, TD Bank, and Teamster Local 237 IBT. Let's give them all a hand. We also wanted to recognize our benefit committee who has been working tirelessly from the summer to put this together. Their names are listed in the journal, but I wanted to ask our benefit committee to please stand so you could be recognized for your commitment and hard work. Thank you so much. I hope this evening will inspire you to learn more about the work we do and support Erase Racism. Please sign up for our email newsletter if you haven't already. And on our website, you'll see a lot of incredible material that is so worthy of reviewing: opinion pieces, research reports, essays written by students. And I'll close with an invitation. If you're a member of our Partnership for Racial Equity, you have a banner under your name tag that says Partner. If you don't have a partner banner, please consider signing up today. You can sign up via our website or take one of the envelopes that's on your table and write partner at the bottom with your contact information and put it in that bag, and we'll collect those and we'll be in touch with you. And if you're so inclined, you may include a donation in that envelope.
I believe, Kalpana, we have accomplished our assignment. It has been our pleasure to share our gratitude and acknowledge special people who make the work of Erase Racism possible. People like our Regent, Roger Tillis, former award winner, people from the health fields, educators, college advisors, boards of education, and at this point I would like to take a moment and personally thank my board, the Amityville School District Board, and its president, Dr. Terry Fulton. Housing authorities, lawyers, all those who join us tonight to make the mission of making Long Island just and equitable. Finally, it is my honor and duty to introduce our president, Elaine Gross. Those of you in the audience who know me know that it is a rare occasion when I am without words. Yet, tonight and any night when I am asked to introduce Elaine Gross, no matter how long or how hard I look for the descriptors, I cannot find the right words. Let me once again try. Elaine Gross is formidable. She's passionate. She's a visionary who devotes 48 of the normal 24 hours to making her vision a reality. She has the insight and compassion of the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She has the common touch and the drive of the late John Lewis. She has the speaking and writing talent of the late Dr. Martin Luther King. And best of all, she has the ability to convince us, her staff, the board, and you that the blueprint she has created will one day be the model for justice and equity for all on Long Island. Please join me in a standing ovation for Elaine Gross.
Thank you very much. Would you bring me my glasses, please, Jess? So good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here tonight. This is our 20th anniversary, 20 years. And I'm going to take a moment to look back, and then we're going to quickly move forward. But 20 years ago, Susie Sonnenberg, then the executive director of the Long Island Community Foundation, hired me, first as a consultant and then as a staff person, to develop and direct a new initiative that would become Erase Racism. Susie believed in me, certainly, and she believed in the cause of advancing racial equity by addressing the institutional and structural barriers to opportunity and equity. Thankfully, LICF board member Abraham Krasnoff was a champion from the start. And if you look in your journal, you'll learn a little bit more about Abe. Our highest award, the Courage and Commitment Award, is named after Abraham Krasnoff. He didn't ask, so how many victories are you going to have next year? He knew that the racial equity work he had done with his company and in his community took time, and he assumed that whatever we worked on would take time. He was willing to invest in Erase Racism. They also believed in the concept of public good. I don't believe we used that language back then, but they saw an institutional hole on Long Island back in 2001. Abe believed he had an obligation to be a philanthropist, but importantly, he was also a steward of the organization that he believed was essential for the public good of the region. In their eyes, in 2001, they saw mostly groups providing services, sometimes excellent services, of course, to help people in need. What they didn't see was an organization that was relentlessly going after the core, the foundational, the essential problem of racism on Long Island. And as I saw it then and now, the essential problem is not general racial prejudice and bias. The essential problem is institutional and structural racism, which is fueled by the overall embrace of the white supremacy narrative, both explicitly and implicitly. In other words, sometimes the white supremacy narrative and its related policies and actions are intentionally embraced. And we've seen that this year. And other times, it takes hold without our even realizing it. So let me tell you a story about Erase Racism that will help you understand what I'm talking about. Over the past 20 years as president of this organization, I have persistently tried to get ordinary residents and civic and government leaders to take seriously the obligation to fight housing discrimination. Individuals, businesses, and governments must not be allowed to violate laws and intentionally or unintentionally engage in housing discrimination against people because of characteristics that are protected in our fair housing laws, including race and ethnicity, among others. If they do discriminate, the punishment must be severe and specific enough that it keeps them from being repeat discriminators. So Erase Racism's first pillar is to tell the truth even in the face of strong opposition. We've done that with our research reports, infographics, conferences, workshops, lawsuits, analysis of federal, New York State, and local government policies, submission of formal responses and recommendations, and community education and organizing. Through this work, we've provided plenty of evidence over the past 20 years that Long Island was among the most racially segregated metro regions in the nation, and how housing segregation fueled other inequities, such as racial segregation in our public schools. In 2021, you've seen and heard us telling the truth in some 114 stories that have focused on or cited erased racism in print, online, radio, and television, including 9 opinion articles by me in local as well as national outlets so far this year. Analysis from the 2020 census tell us that on Long Island, the Black-White Segregation or Dissimilarity Index score is 65.5. A score that is greater than 60 connotes severe segregation. This is 2021. When looking at Black-White segregation, Long Island maintains its position as the 10th most racially segregated metro region in the nation. When we contracted for a research study in 2012, we found that contrary to the false myth of self-segregation, just 1% of the Black respondents said they wanted to live only in neighborhoods that were entirely Black. This reflects peer-reviewed studies conducted throughout the past few decades on other areas across the nation, consistently showing African Americans preferring racially diverse neighborhoods. Further evidence of ongoing housing discrimination included successful settlements of Erase Racism's rental housing discrimination lawsuits, ongoing lawsuits from other nonprofits, and of course the findings from the groundbreaking 3-year investigation by Newsday, which we helped to instigate, that showed that Black testers asking about for-sale housing received disparate treatment 49% of the time by real estate agents, as well as 39% for Hispanics and 19% for Asians. And I have to recognize that Olivia Winslow from Newsday is here today. We are so grateful to you and your colleagues, Olivia, for that work. For us, Newsday's investigation confirmed that sector-wide housing discrimination by realtors, who are the gatekeepers protecting white communities from becoming racially mixed communities, and that they were succeeding in keeping the decreases in Black-white segregation more like a drip than a gush of water. We saw clearly that the common myth was not true. This segregation was not self-imposed by African Americans or happenstance. Institutional and structural racism were the root cause. Our second pillar is to ensure accountability of government and other actors responsible for institutions and structures that produce racial inequities, discrimination, marginalization, and segregation with disastrous results. In addition to speaking the truth, we have worked to advance policies that would combat housing segregation on a structural level. In direct response to Newsday's findings, I was invited to provide expert testimony for 2 New York State Joint Senate Committee public hearings on Long Island housing discrimination. I offered recommendations to fight housing discrimination and saw those recommendations reflected in the fair housing legislation package developed by the senators. And in 2021, 7 bills passed both the Senate and the Assembly. And those bills now await the governor's signature to enact those bills into law. So I'm not supposed to say this, but if you know the governor, would you give her a call? And the laws really do strengthen state accountability for enforcement of fair housing statutes. We've also succeeded in getting local and New York State fair housing laws amended to be more protective, including most recently organizing a statewide coalition that made legal source of income a protected characteristic in New York State, and that took effect in 2019. Another structural solution we work on is affirmatively furthering fair housing. Along with making housing discrimination illegal, Congress, through the Fair Housing Act of 1968, went further with the duty to affirmatively further fair housing, or AFFH, which means that governments and others receiving funding involved in housing and community development must take meaningful actions to overcome patterns of segregation and foster inclusive communities. AFFH requires addressing such things as discriminatory laws, policies and measures, zoning regulations, exclusionary policy development, exclusion from housing benefits, lack of access to credit, and I could go on. And also against the discriminatory practices carried out by private actors. So HUD was charged with enforcement of the Fair Housing Act, including the duty to AFFH, and they have not done that. So Erase Racism filed Erase Racism filed and HUD accepted our administrative complaint in 2014. The central allegation of that complaint against Nassau County is that it was not upholding its duty to AFFH because the county's actions or omissions discriminate against and perpetuate racial segregation of African Americans. This matter remains unresolved. Further, we designed an assessment tool that can quantitatively measure a proposed housing development's potential to affirmatively further housing, thanks to Cam Owen from my staff. And on this matter of the tool, I'm a member of the State of New York Mortgage Authority, what's called the Sony May Board. And I introduced the assessment tool to the board just this month as an important component of making funding decisions about affordable housing projects. I made the case that the board members needed to know if we are furthering fair housing or furthering racial segregation when we vote to provide funding for housing projects. And that required systematically analyzing each housing proposal to determine its potential to affirmatively further fair housing. Certainly, the federal government was the instigator of housing inequality, and I think many of you know Long Island's history concerning Levittown, et cetera, and other places too on Long Island with racial covenants in the deeds, et cetera, deeds. And you know that those racial covenants kept out black veterans while white veterans were able to take advantage of the heavily subsidized affordable housing in Levittown. Along with housing developers, sectors such as banking and insurance embraced the unjust policies. And realtors, of course, created these practices long before the government adopted them. Nationally, between 1934 and 1962, the federal government backed $120 billion in home loans. Over 98% went to whites. The federal and local government failure to act ensures ongoing systematic housing discrimination. The resulting structural racism is hard to dislodge, but the AFFH mandate can help, but only if we put in place vigilant accountability measures. Tonight, I have highlighted our housing work, but the same pillars guide our education work. So the PowerPoint those slides that were scrolling earlier, they're going to be on our website. Plus, you have some information in the journal. And keep an eye out for some new reports that are coming out. I do believe that the resources that you see, I hope, will help you have a clearer sense, as Abe did, that erase racism is a public good that this region needs. We need to continue to tell the truth in the face of strong opposition. We need to continue to ensure accountability of government and other actors responsible for institutions and structures that produce racial inequities, discrimination, marginalization, and segregation with disastrous results. Thank you so much. So I must acknowledge my staff because they have their full-time jobs, and I know some organizations hire people to run their fundraising events. And we don't do that because we're trying to save every penny. So I'd like the staff to please sort of stand or wave as I call your name. Nicole Grennan, there she is in the back. She's the community educator organizer. And Cam Owen is our policy analyst and researcher. And most especially, Shirley Sharonfont, our controller and operations manager, coordinates this event. So everyone here tonight is special, whether you're here in person or online. But I want to just mention that we have I have the pleasure of saying that in our presence tonight is the civil rights attorney of national acclaim, Ben Crump. And many of you know that name, connected with Trayvon Martin, with George Floyd, with Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor. And we are so grateful that there are people like Mr. Crump who do the work that he does. So thank you. So I have some good news to share. So you're at a fundraising event, so you know this was coming. But you didn't know that this was coming, because I didn't know this was coming. An anonymous donor has committed to matching every donation, dollar for dollar, from today through December 31st, up to $30,000. So what this means is that every dollar donated, whether it's tonight or some other time before we get to the end of the year, up to $30,000 will be matched. And this is wonderful. This is, when you talk about stewards, for the next 20 years of Erase Racism, this is how it starts. And so I am confident that those of you who are here this evening will do what you can to help us achieve this match. And we do make it easy. There are little envelopes on your table. If you have a checkbook, you could do it that way. You can also, I know you've been using your phone to do your silent auction bids, so you can go to our website, eraseracismny.org, and you could do it that way. So I would like to move now to talk about our Raise Your Voice essay contest for high school students. Yes. And if the high school students can make their way to this side of the podium, I'd appreciate it. We have 4 essay contest winners tonight. And for each of the winners, they will receive $500 scholarship to assist with their post-high school education. Thanks to the, that's right, thanks to the generous contribution from the Scope Education Services. So thank you very much, George Duffy. There were 27 essays submitted this year by public high school seniors on Long Island in response to the questions, why it is crucial that teachers teach about the history of racism in the U.S. and how learning about racism helps us build a more racially just Long Island for your generation and future ones. So I'm going to have Dr. Joan Lang join me. Joan, where are you? Join me on the podium where we can hand out our awards and take photos with the students. Asha Brown from West Hempstead. Next, we have Gabriela Persantes from George Hewlett High School. Anika Duhaney from Malvern High School. and Lakshana Ravadran, Comac High School. Oh, let me get my glasses off. Sorry. Okay. So our leadership award today goes to the New York State Nurses Association. And I'd like Yasmin to kind of work her way toward the front. We recognize the New York State Nurses Association for heroically fighting the pandemic with nurses statewide as COVID shed a light on the shameful health disparities experienced by people of color, particularly African Americans. NISNA represents more than 42,000 members in New York State. They are New York's largest union and professional association for registered nurses. Nancy Hagans, the new president of the association, was not able to join us this evening. But this is what she said about NISNA and nurses. And I quote, "We are a very powerful force for patients and their communities. Our voice is respected, our skills are professional, our roles central to society's health care. As I take on the responsibilities of the presidency, and a landmark staffing law has just been achieved. What a victory. The law represents years of outreach and action by our members and fellow caregivers to communities whose collective voices were heard. The staffing law is a giant step forward